When you think about the most extreme places on Earth, say the summit of Mount Everest.
Right, completely hostile territory. Humans need sophisticated oxygen systems just to stay alive for a few minutes.
Exactly. And yet, researchers have seen birds, the red-billed chough, just hopping around up there like it's nothing.
It's incredible. They've conquered every corner of the globe, the frozen parts of Antarctica, the driest deserts. They're everywhere.
They really are. And they're so common they almost become background noise. But the sources we've pulled for this deep dive suggest if you actually stop and, look under the hood, you're not just looking at an animal.
No, you're looking at one of the most advanced pieces of engineering on the planet. We think of tech as like silicon and steel, but birds are these bioengineering marvels.
And that's our mission for this deep dive, to really unpack the secret life of birds. We're going to get into the evolutionary history that connects, say, a sparrow to a T-Rex.
And why that connection is way more literal than people realize.
For sure. And then there's the physics-defying anatomy of flight and some of the, well, just bizarre behaviors of certain species.
And we really have to start with that history, with the dinosaurs. Because when we say related to dinosaurs, I think most people imagine a distant cousin kind of situation.
Right, but the science is much stricter on this. The materials we read made it pretty clear birds aren't just related to dinosaurs.
They are dinosaurs.
They are. Specifically, they're the one lineage of theropod dinosaurs that survived that asteroid impact.
That's the consensus now, yeah. Theropods were the two-legged meat eaters, your velociraptor, your T-Rex.
So if you strip away the size difference and look at the skeleton, say, of an early dinosaur like Eoraptor and compare it to a modern ostrich.
The blueprints are nearly identical. Same hollow bones, three-toed feet, that upright posture with the feet right under the body.
I was looking at the skeletal comparisons, and the detail that really stuck out to me was the wrist. It seems so minor, but the papers treat it like the smoking gun.
It is the smoking gun, the semilunate carpal. It's this crescent-shaped wrist bone.
Okay.
In a velociraptor, that bone let them swivel their hands in a very specific sweeping motion to snatch prey. It was a hunting tool.
And now you fast forward millions of years.
And you see that exact same bone, that exact same swivel in a modern pigeon, but it's not for snatching prey anymore.
Right, it's for flight.
Exactly. Evolution is the ultimate opportunist. It repurposed that snatching motion. That wrist swivel is now the key mechanism that allows a bird to fold its wing up tight or to manage the complex angles of the flight stroke.
So the same hardware, just running different software.
Perfectly put.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the famous Archaeopteryx.
Ah, yes, the classic missing link.
Though, looking at the description, it feels less like a missing link and more like a mishmash of parts.
It really was. You've got this creature from 150 million years ago.
Yeah.
It had modern-looking wings and flight feathers, no question.
But it also had a mouthful of sharp teeth.
And claws sticking out of its wings. And a long, bony, lizard-like tail. Not the short, fused tailbone modern birds have.
So it's a perfect snapshot of that transition. It probably couldn't fly like a modern bird, right?
Unlikely. It didn't have the right muscle anchors for powered flight, but it could definitely glide. It was a reptile testing the waters of the sky.
And eventually they stopped testing and fully committed. And this is where the physics gets intense, because flight is basically a war against weight.
It is. You have to be light, but you also have to be strong enough to handle the forces of flight. That's the paradox.
The stat that blew me away was that a bird's skeleton is often less than 10% of its total body weight.
Yeah, which is just wild.
And we all hear that bird bones are hollow, but the diagrams show they're not just empty tubes, are they?
No, if they were empty, they'd be too fragile. They had this internal honeycomb structure, struts of bone that crisscross the hollow space. It's the exact same principle we use to build airplane wings.
Maximum rigidity for minimum material, and they just ruthlessly cut weight everywhere else. No heavy jaw and teeth. That's replaced by a lightweight keratin bill.
Forearms become wings.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the catch. You strip all that weight, but you still need a massive engine to generate lift.
You can't just float, you have to flap.
And flapping is incredibly energy intensive. This is why the breastbone, the sternum, is so unique in birds. It has this huge ridge sticking out at a right angle called the keel.
It looks just like the keel of a boat.
It does. And that ridge is the anchor point for the flight muscles. In us, our chest muscles are, relatively small.
Yeah.
In a bird, those muscles can be up to 40% of its entire body weight.
They're just flying engines.
Pure power plants.
And an engine that powerful needs a ton of fuel, specifically oxygen. Now, this is the part of the research where I had to stop and read the section like 3 times. The respiratory system?
It's not intuitive at all.
No, I just assumed birds breathe like we do. You know.
Most people do. But our system, the mammalian system, is actually pretty inefficient. When you exhale, you never get all the air out.
There's always dead air left over.
Exactly. So your fresh breath is always mixing with stale exhaust. Birds. Well, birds fix that problem.
But the mechanism is wild. It's not a 2-step cycle, it's a 4-step cycle.
That's right. They have a whole system of air sacs that run from their throat all the way down to their toes. So get this. When a bird inhales the first time, the air bypasses the lungs and goes to a rear air sac.
Okay, step 1, air goes to the back.
Step 2, the bird exhales. That fresh air moves from the rear sac into the lungs. That's when the oxygen exchange happens.
While it's breathing out.
All it's breathing out.
Yeah.
Step 3, the bird inhales again. The now stale air moves from the lungs into a front air sac.
And finally, step 4, the bird exhales a second time, and that stale air leaves the body.
Precisely. It takes 2 full breaths for 1 molecule of air to go through the whole system.
But the result is that fresh, oxygen-rich air is flowing through the lungs in a single direction, constantly.
They get oxygen on the inhale and the exhale.
Which explains the Mount Everest thing. While we're up there gasping, they're getting this constant high-octane fuel supply.
It also doubles as a cooling system. Birds don't sweat. That internal airflow helps vent heat from the core of their body. It's brilliant.
Let's move to the exterior then, the defining feature. Feathers.
The most complex skin structure in the entire animal kingdom.
And it's just keratin, same stuff as our fingernails or a rhino's horn. But the engineering at the microscopic level, that's what makes flight possible. This Velcro idea.
Yeah, if you look at a feather under a microscope, you see the central shaft and the barbs coming off it. But then off those barbs are even smaller barbules, and they have tiny little hooks.
And these hooks zip the barbs together.
They do. Which is why you see birds preening all the time. They're not just cleaning themselves.
They're re-zipping their flight surfaces?
Exactly. If the barbs separate, air gets through, they lose lift. So they're doing constant mechanical repairs.
And some feathers are even more specialized, like the owls, the ninja of the sky.
The owl is a perfect example. Those birds make a whoosh sound when they fly because of air turbulence, but owls have this serrated, comb-like edge on their main flight feathers.
And that breaks up the turbulence.
Into tiny microcurrents. It basically muffles the sound completely. They can fly in virtual silence.
Which brings us to their senses. If you're a silent hunter, you still need to find your target in the dark.
Right. And their sensory suite is just superior to ours in almost every way. We all know about hawk vision spotting a mouse from a mile away.
But what about navigation? The source has touched on this, and it honestly feels like science fiction, this idea that they can see magnetic fields.
Magnetoreception. It's one of the frontiers of biology right now. The leading theory involves a protein in the bird's eye called cryptochrome.
Cryptochrome.
When sunlight hits this protein, it creates a quantum chemical reaction that's actually sensitive to magnetic fields. Some scientists think this creates a visual overlay for the bird.
So they might literally see the Earth's magnetic field as like a pattern of light or shadow laid over the world.
That's the idea, a built-in heads-up display.
That is just incredible. And it would explain how something like the Arctic tern manages the longest migration on Earth.
The undisputed heavyweight champion of travel.
I mean, the numbers are staggering. 44,000 miles round trip every single year, from the Arctic Circle to the Antarctic ice and back.
Over its lifetime, a single tern will fly the distance to the moon and back. 3 times.
But why? Why go to all that trouble?
It's all about energy. They're chasing the summer. By flying between the poles, they see more daylight than any other creature on the planet.
And daylight means you can hunt.
24 hours a day if you want. It's an almost infinite energy supply.
So you have the ultimate traveler on one end, and on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you have the birds that basically look at the sky and said, no thanks, the flightless birds.
The ratites.
Yeah.
You have to remember, evolution doesn't care about being advanced.
Yeah.
It cares about efficiency. And flight is incredibly expensive, energy-wise.
So if you land on an island with no predators,
why bother maintaining those huge flight muscles? It makes more sense to save the calories. You get the dodo or the kiwi.
But the ostrich is a different story. It didn't lose flight because it was safe. It lost flight because it decided to become a racehorse.
It is built for one thing, running. It's the only bird with just 2 toes.
I wondered about that. Why only 2?
Less friction. It's the same principle as a horse's hoof. The fewer points of contact with the ground, the faster you can go. The ostrich can hit 45 miles per hour. It traded wings for pure speed.
Then you've got the kakapo from New Zealand, which just seems confused.
The world's heaviest parrot. It has wings, but they're way too small. It climbs trees using its beak like a grappling hook, but getting down is clumsy.
It just jumps and hopes for the best.
Pretty much a controlled crash. It's what happens when you evolve for millions of years without any real predators.
Before we wrap up, I want to touch on behavior. We've talked about the hardware, but the software is just as fascinating. Specifically, the satin bowerbird.
A little architect.
So the male builds this structure, a bower, but it's not a nest, right?
No, it's a stage. It's purely a courtship display. A bachelor pad? He builds this avenue of sticks to impress females. But it's the decorating that's just startling.
He's obsessed with the color blue.
Completely obsessed. In nature, you'd find blue berries or maybe a rare blue feather.
Hmm?
But in the modern world,
Stealing our trash.
blue bottle caps, blue straws, blue plastic forks. He arranges them meticulously. Scientists have tested this. If they move one of his objects, he'll notice and move it right back.
He's curating an art installation. It shows this level of aesthetic preference you just don't expect.
It really does.
And finally, let's talk about the very beginning. The egg. We crack them into a pan without a second thought, but they're marvels.
A self-contained life support capsule. The dome shape is incredibly strong, so the parent can sit on it. But the shell is also porous, with thousands of tiny holes to let oxygen in.
And the yolk doesn't just float around in there, does it?
No, if it did, the embryo would smash against the shell. There's a structure called a chalaza. It's that white, stringy bit you sometimes see attached to the yolk.
Yeah, I usually try to get that out.
Well, it's a biological bungee cord. It's a shock absorber that anchors the yolk in the exact center of the egg, cushioning it from any impact.
So we've gone from a velociraptor's wrist to quantum navigation to shock absorbers in a chicken egg. It paints a very different picture.
I think the takeaway for me is just how dominant they are. We think we rule the planet, but birds have mastered the air, the land, and the water in ways we're still just trying to copy with our technology.
Speaking of copying, I wanted to close with that Operation Migration story.
Oh, that's a great one. The whooping cranes. They were nearly extinct, and the ones raised in captivity didn't know how to migrate. They had the instinct, but not the map.
So humans taught them.
Humans dressed up in these big, baggy white crane costumes so the birds wouldn't get used to people, and they flew ultralight aircraft from Wisconsin all the way to Florida, leading the young cranes.
They showed them the way.
A beautiful intersection of our ingenuity and their biological imperative.
I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. We mentioned Jurassic Park. Everyone is obsessed with bringing dinosaurs back. But the sources we read make it clear you don't need amber, you don't need complex DNA sequencing.
You really don't.
When you look at a pigeon on a power line or a chicken in a farm, you are looking at a modern theropod dinosaur, one that refused to go extinct.
And when you eat an egg for breakfast, you're interacting with a biological design that's been field tested for over 150 million years.
You're interacting with deep time every single day.
It definitely changes how you look at a chicken sandwich.
It sure does. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into the secret life of birds.
Keep looking up.